Welcome. Tonight's program will dive deep into fringe knowledge of lost, hidden, and suppressed truths about the nature of our reality. The decoding process can be uncomfortable and at times frightening. However, you are not alone on this journey of understanding. Welcome to the Shadow Band podcast, and welcome home.
Recording in progress. We're back once again, and you guys are sitting in front of the new light. I like it a lot. I got the green screen version, not as good. Looking pretty good.
I know. We really wanted to reveal it with you here, but
That's okay.
it's been weeks.
I'm gonna let it slide. Don't let it happen again.
Blame
we got
COVID.
Yeah, right. We got a special guest, somebody who I came across on Facebook, I don't know, a month ago or something like that. You guys had a huge increase in people following you and joining the page and joining your YouTube and all that stuff. But we have David from the Anti-Establishment Media joining us today. We're going to talk about a couple different things, but before we get into it too deep, David, if you want to take a couple minutes and kind of let all our listeners know who you are, what you're doing, your organization and all that, floor is yours, bud.
Sure. So we actually started Anti-Establishment Media not too long ago. It's only been actually coming up on 2 months ago, which is pretty crazy. So it's been rapid growth. And it's a project that I'm working on with a couple of friends of mine that are all in different aspects of media, film production, podcasts, different things like that. My background is marketing. So I do a lot of digital marketing and things like that kind of off the bat. That's what I've always sort of focused on as a professional career. And prior to that, I was really involved in, like, from an educational background, a lot of different things in political science, foreign affairs, things like that. And so, I never really was super active in the political sphere at all. I really, I guess you could say my personal political beliefs have always been more along the libertarian platform. I've always been personally kind of a conservative myself, like just in terms of how I operate my life. But I have always been kind of libertarian to an extension of not really caring a whole lot about politics. I kind of just was, I do my thing, you do your thing, and it is what it is. Like, let's just all do what we want, as long as you don't hurt me, don't take my stuff, kind of stuff. And I really, alongside several of the people that are working on this project and some of my closest friends, I guess you could say we really woke up over the last several years, and none of us were supporters really of Trump specifically, but I think it became very obvious of really the way things work in this country, right? I think that in terms of, there really is this specific group of people or groups of people that really kind of call the shots and run a lot of different things in this country. And so obviously we've seen over the last several years, with everything that's taken place with Trump, just overall the media, like big tech, the media, the government institutions that are like kind of the legacy government institutions, as well as academia, all as like controlling the levers of power in this country, right? I mean, that's what it's been.
I got a chokehold on it.
Yeah, it's blindingly obvious, right? I mean, for anybody paying attention that has any ounce of ability to just think through things without any sort of bias. And so I really started to take note of a lot of the different things that were going on, where I don't know if you guys know an author named Rod Dreher, but he coins it soft totalitarianism, right? So it's this soft, it's not this overt like USSR style totalitarianism, but it's this soft totalitarianism of the stranglehold that those four institutions have on every aspect of life, of media, of thoughts, of the the general flow of information in this country. And so that became, over the last several years, again, like to round it all out, that became just glaringly obvious. And I wanted to do what I can to be a part of combating against that, because I obviously, coming from a person who truly believes in liberty, and coming from, you know, an entire background of people that my whole family has been involved in service to this country in many different ways. And so the ideals of America are really important to me. I guess like what you could say is the founding principles, even though throughout history, we very often didn't live up to those founding principles as a nation in many ways. But I think that the principles themselves are not flawed, even though we didn't always live up to them.
Yeah, they're still worth trying to uphold.
Sure, and bring back. So that's what led me to start this, and to really just, okay, how can I do what I can personally do to use the skills that I have and the skills that other people have to actually start bringing these things to the forefront. Because at the end of the day, I don't believe that there's going to be one single institution that's going to be the dominant conversation holder in this realm, right? It's going to come from a large network of independent, distributed voices that are all going to reach their own group of people in some way, shape, or form, right? So it's not going to be, I mean, obviously, most of the listeners probably listening to this don't look at Fox News as like the actual liberty conservative, news network. It's not. But at the end of the day, there are lots of voices that are pushing for liberty, that are truly trying to bring those actual values to the forefront of the conversation. And I think that it's going to take a lot of people in a distributed effort to really bring that to a reality, to where we can actually reach the masses. Because obviously the tides are against us, right? I mean, the tide is moving against us in terms of the flow of information and the distribution of that information. So
we're double TikTok banned already.
Yeah.
Double. Yeah.
So that's kind of that's been the conversation in the back of my mind for several years now. And I never really acted on it. And so it just kind of came time to, I have these skills of marketing and writing and things like that. I have friends that, are producing movies that are coming out very soon about several hot button topics that are going to be big when they release. They'll definitely be really, really big. So so that's kind of the goal. And we're using the umbrella of the anti-establishment because that's just kind of, that's just, I guess, is the easiest terminology to encompass who we are, what we believe. And, I think that at the end of the day, we're pretty open about the fact that that more than anything, if we're anything, we're against the progressive sort of woke movement more than anything. We definitely have our own issues and beefs with the establishment Republican Party. We're not mouthpieces for the right per se. We lean somewhat conservative, but we have definitely our issues there. But we see the threat overall of what is going on in terms of this new sort of movement that's really unfolded in the last 10 years from the dominant progressive left, mainly again because of their hold on the institutions of power and communication. So, you can say what you want about the right, but they don't have that. It just is what it is. They don't dominate the conversation.
Yeah. And that's an important point too, I think, because people have messaged me and they're like, oh, you're just a Republican, whatever. And I'm like, dude, on this show, we're totally anti-establishment over here. I mean, we joke a lot about the lizard people. They're all lizard people. You know what I mean? And it's just there's no team for us for the most part. I mean, I can look at the right and I can be like, yeah, I agree with this, this, and this. And I can look at the left and be like, I agree with that, and that. But overall, I'm with you 100%. I'm not on a team, and that's for a good reason. You know what I mean? And I think that the Republicans, the politicians at least, they're weak, if anything. They're just completely weak. Now, you go back 20 years ago, maybe not so much. They kind of had a little bit more of the power grab or the power hold on things, you
Sure.
know, and the
Sure, of course.
warmongering and all that stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, it's definitely flipped. But you see that through history from my research, you know, the left and the right wing of the same bird, they just flip sides every, I don't know, 20 years, 40 years, and it causes a whole mess of confusion and division between people. You know what
Because
I mean?
there's like
lot
a
of
whole middle ground of people that are still like, well, they now have to have like, I'm a classical liberal or I'm a classical libertarian or whatever. Because if you took any of us and dropped us 40 years in the past, we'd be hippies,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
or, you know, if you took somebody from the left, you know, from, you know, the 60s and you brought them over to here, you took that same, like, you know, their same age, same beliefs that they, you know, had in the 60s, you brought them here, they'd be a staunch Republican.
Mhm.
Well,
you look at
no,
people
we
like
fight the power, dude. The government's not going to tell me what to do. I mean, that was the left,
Sure.
but now that's the right.
Yeah.
And then all those people who are like, no, I'm not left though. I mean, or I'm not right.
Mhm.
I still believe that, but I'm not right. They're like a man without a country.
Yeah. Well, you look at people like Glenn Greenwald or like Matt Taibbi, like these are people who are liberals in like every sense of the definition. They're economically liberal. They're very pro freedom. They're freedom in the sense of like government not oppressing certain things, but I differ in a lot of different economic policies and things like that. But at the end of the day, these are people who are essentially ostracized from the party that they represented 20 years ago. Piers Morgan is another example.
Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore is another one. He was pretty damn left, and now you listen to Jimmy Dore's show, and it's like, whoa. I mean, he's talking about things that the progressive left definitely doesn't want to talk about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like I don't know why his name's slipping me, but the one like talk show host that is always at this point, he was always like anti-war, he was really anti-Trump, but he's like consistently bashing the Democratic Party. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but
Joe Rogan.
Well, yeah, not him though. He's like one of the night he's one of like the night show guys. But yeah, I mean, you have a lot of people that
Bill Maher.
What's that?
Bill
Maher.
Maher.
Yeah, Bill Maher. Yeah. He's constantly, taking them to task in terms of these very obvious inconsistencies and hypocrisies that they're going through. And so you have a lot of these people that generally they are older, right? They're people that are 40 plus, 50 plus, that have always been liberal and were the heroes of the Democratic Party in terms of, 10, 15, 20 years ago, when we were in the middle of the Iraq war and we were in the middle of Afghanistan and all of these things and Snowden and all of these things were going on. And now they are, they are, just look at their Twitter, look at the comments that they get from people on the left. They are completely looked at as right-wing.
Traitors.
Yeah, traitors for sure. It's crazy. We're in this really strange time. And again, the problem is always the institutions of power. And so like there was in the past, I mean, academia always has obviously kind of been for the most part on the left. But even then what that meant was different, right? Them being on the left was the Glenn Greenwald left, right?
Well, it was like the left back then was like what the right wants education to be. So like they'd be like, no, you could speak all of your ideas and anything goes.
Right.
And the right was always like, no, that's crazy. We need to stick to traditionalism. And now the left has adopted their own traditionalism. And we're like, wait a second. No, let's talk about all that stuff you wanted to talk about. Let's let anything fly. And it's like the same with like jobs back in the day. It was like you could only be a certain way and it was the right's way. And now it's like you can only be a certain way, but it's the extreme left's way. And then the right is now like, no, I mean, like, let's just let anything go. Let's, we could do tattoos. We're fine with that.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get anything back. It's like, please.
Yeah. It's a very strange time. And again, I think that we have so many people that are just in this radical middle area that don't really feel too aligned. But I think that, I think there's a lot of people that would lean a lot more into like the libertarian camp in that direction, at least, if it wasn't for them legitimately feeling like their freedom was at stake if the Republicans aren't in office. I mean, I know a lot of people in that camp that they don't know what else to do. And I don't think that they necessarily are diehard fans of their agenda or policies or anything like that, but it's kind of like voting for your survival, I guess you could say. And I think that
it's a brilliant tactic by
to stay in power.
The fake two-party system.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like it's always business as usual. The only way that they can keep it business as usual is put somebody so anti what you believe in, and then give you the obvious dud for your party. And then the other side, you know, they're facing the same thing, you know. So Biden and Trump are the perfect examples, because it's like you got a guy who's battling dementia, clearly, definitely the right's dud, and then you've got, you know, the Trump who's like, he's unpredictable. The left absolutely hates him. So it's like you got the two polar opposites up there. And it's like, if I vote for the third party, that's basically guaranteeing that the other guy wins.
Yeah.
And so you have to vote for your dud.
Right.
It's like, I felt like even when I liked a lot of, not most, but a decent amount of what Donald Trump had done when he was in office.
Sure.
When I was told he was running for president, I was a state trooper at the time. My buddy texted me, and he was like, Donald Trump's running for president. And I'm like, wow, man, we're going to have a for sure Democrat president for sure. He's definitely winning the Democratic ticket. And he was like, he's running as Republican. I was like, what? How? There's no way. And I'm sure enough.
They do that on purpose. And I've said this before. I'm pretty sure, you know, back in 2016, 2015, 2016, I always said like Trump is probably just going to be the wrench in the system. Like he's going to mess the whole system up. And at the time I was like, go for it. Because again, I'm like the anti-lizard people guy. So I was like, yeah, throw the wrench in the system, right? Let's collapse some of these institutions that David's talking about. But now that I see what's really happening and how that collapse works, I'm like, oh crap, dude, like that was not the best way to go about this. You know what I mean? Throwing that wrench in the system was not good, because you have these extreme progressives that are literally, like you said, not only taking control of these institutions, but they're trying to like burn them down from the inside out, it seems. You know, when you think about like education, where they're distributing basically pornography to kids in schools and stuff like that. And half the people are like, oh, that's okay. You know, it's just like,
oh, and let's not forget, they're resegregating the schools.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, how are we taking that one back? It's lunacy, and it's just being bought wholesale.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it, and this comes into like some of these ideas, like these are not my original ideas per se, but it's a lot of like the social pressure, right? So I think that there's actually a lot fewer people that buy into these ideas than it looks like, but they don't buy into it, meaning actually believe it. They go along with it, right? Because we live in a time where, you know, just doing like what we're doing puts a giant target on your back, right? You face, like, I'm not worried about it. Like I'm not cancelable per se. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are. And so it puts people in a position to where you look at a lot of the people that they work a corporate job, or they work in academia, or they work for the government, or they do all of these different things. And so like it comes to just a survival mode where you go along with these different things for fear of the repercussions if you don't, right? Like I can only imagine being like in the corporate world where it's like your worst nightmare is waking up to you going viral on Twitter for something stupid that you said 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so like the people in our country are literally walking on eggshells every day, because they don't want to be that person, because they can lose everything. They can lose their career. I mean, there's crazy things that can happen. You can even lose your kids. I mean, you never know what is going to happen. And so I think a lot of people like these issues per se don't necessarily affect them, and they don't care enough about them to be vocal about it. So they just go with the flow because all the major cultural institutions are pushing them in that direction. So they just ride the wave. And so I think that's one of the big things for sure.
The other thing too is like I've noticed, especially since COVID's happened, like I've seen it with my own eyes. It's been like a theory before, but then like I'm starting to see it actualize more, is the just giving the regular, you know, anonymous guy or gal power. And it's like, I'm abusing it. I don't know if I'm sure you guys have heard of the that like social experiment where they let the guys go, like they put everybody in a prison and they made some guys guards and some guys prisoners, and it like turned into this horribly abusive situation like really quickly.
Yeah, I think that was like a university experiment, I think, or something.
Yeah, so that like I saw that happen a lot during COVID, because it's like now the guy who's just the drive-through guy can now tell you he's not serving you because you don't have your mask on, right? I'm not serving you because you don't have gloves on, or whatever it is. And it's like the second they get that little bit of power, I'm going to run with it. You're a white guy and you're in a culture corner. Well, guess what? Now I'm going to yell at you so you can get out. Like that little tiny sliver of power, I'm now going to abuse it. Because regular people don't have that kind of authority and they're not vetted for it. Yeah. You know, like if you're going into the military, you're going into, you know, anything that requires, you know, police, whatever it is, management, you're vetted to make sure that you can handle that kind of authority. The lady in the drive-through line is not vetted to handle the authority of refusing a customer. Some kid in school is not vetted for the authority to run a group that can, you know, run white guys out of it. You know what I mean? There's no nobody's vetted, you know, before they start running in some extremist riot group or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they're like, oh, let's make sure that, you know, you can contain a situation and, you know, things don't go crazy and we, you know, burn down St. Louis or something. It's like, but those are the people that end up being in that spot. They get that little bit of power and then kaboom.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's just obviously going to be human nature, and again, like we've seen it happen. I mean, even from the calls on the left. I mean, we went from this is all. I mean, there's ample evidence that's still there of everybody, you know, that was adamant they were not going to take Trump's vaccine. Right? They just weren't going to do it. I mean, that was. I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure like both Kamala Harris and Biden both said that they were skeptical, like that they wouldn't.
Nancy Pelosi, all of them.
Yeah, they weren't going to do it just because Trump said it was good. They were very careful about their wording because it was, you know, politically expedient to navigate that question very carefully.
They weren't careful. Kamala Harris flat out said, I'm not taking that vaccine. If Trump puts it out, I'm not taking it. She flat out said it just like that. Yeah, 100%. Okay.
I know Biden kind of navigated to where it was like, well, if the scientists all say it's good, I will. But like, I mean, he was very careful.
Well, I saw a clip that he was like, who's going to want to be the first people to take that vaccine? I'm like,
yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Him.
Us. Yeah. We will, because you're forcing us.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where we went from that to, you know, now it's the biggest thing that they dangle in front of in terms of that power. And it's not just politicians. It's the actual citizenry that is trying to use this as a means to crush the other side. We don't want to give them health care. We don't want to, you know, allow them to leave their house. We don't want them to be able to fly. We don't want them to be able to do all of these things because they aren't doing this, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. They've been having this argument for the last like 10 years that healthcare is a human right and should be free and accessible to anybody. And now there's rules around it. They're talking about when Trump shut down travel from China, xenophobe, or the Middle East, xenophobe. That's a people group. You can't do that. But now those same people are like, you don't have a vaccine? You can't travel. It's like, that's the same thing.
Well, this is what
A
David was
1
talking
year
about.
ago you were flipping out about.
Yeah, on your first episode, I was watching it on YouTube, and you're talking about the tightening of the ratchet idea. You know what I mean? And I know that obviously it's like unconstitutional, like with the certain mandates and all this and that kind of stuff. But they do push that control and power off to corporations and to businesses. That's why the businesses are supposed to uphold this and not the government. So it's almost like they just find a little loophole and they're like, we don't have to do it. We'll just make Walmart do it or whatever. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you put the pressure on. And again, those people, even though they're heads of corporations, they are not vetted and qualified to administer unconstitutional control over people. The amount, I mean, how many employees does Facebook, Walmart, Target? I mean, how many customers do that? I mean, that's the whole population of the United States that they're now able to exercise this power over. And they are not qualified to do that.
Corporatocracy, man. This is the encroachment of corporatocracy. People like to use the word fascism, which it is kind of fascism, but it's more corporatocracy than it is fascism, I think.
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, that's exercising this control over, people's movement and things like that. But it's no different than, all of these platforms that are essentially spying on everybody's conversations and movements and everything. I mean, and obviously we voluntarily do it, but I just remember, Biden saying that, or I don't think it was maybe him that said it specifically, but maybe it was the press correspondent person, but talking about how like we tell Facebook like what posts are troublesome. I mean, I remember that being a conversation where like they specifically said that they tell Facebook and other social media platforms like what specific content on social media is a problem so that it can be dealt with properly, right? So it's no different than the government working hand in hand with social media to regulate speech. It's not a First Amendment violation because it's a private company, but I think it's beyond time to really have not just conversations like this about it, but a national conversation about how private these entities really are. And are they actually making these decisions on their own? Or is it some measure of government, even coercion, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily have to be the White House telling Facebook, you need to remove these people and these posts. There comes to be a measure of self-censorship when it's simply, you are going to do certain things or we're going to regulate the shit out of you, right? Like when government holds that power to write endless legislation to just bury Facebook or these other giant tech companies, they are dangling that carrot, those keys over their head. And so it forces a certain type of behavior at the end of it.
What was the baseball team that moved their stadium or whatever? It was just earlier this year. I don't follow sports at all, but like
not sure.
Baseball. So I think it was somewhere down here in the South somewhere. Baseball team moved their stadium somewhere else. There was an airline that was going back and forth with a governor about getting regulated in their state and stuff over who can fly and who can't. It's like,
well, just today, I was watching Saki's press conference because I have a guilty pleasure of watching all her press conferences. And one of the reporters asked her, what about the Facebook whistleblower situation that just happened, right? And her response, I don't know quote for what it was word for word, but it was something along the lines of, we're going to have talks about more regulation. But the problem is big corporations like Facebook, Walmart, Amazon, they love regulations. The more regulations you put on, corporations have billions of dollars and all of the resources to find the loopholes and work around the regulations. The regulations really hurt small businesses more than anything. So they can regulate to the moon about Facebook, and they'll weed their way through it and it'll be all good for Facebook, but it's going to crush the smaller platforms like Float or like Telegram or whatever, you know what I mean? So that's the problem.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that we're in this age where we are being pushed by a lot of these institutions and companies to sort of do the government's bidding. I mean, they're doing a lot of the same things. And again, because of like the social pressure and the censorship and a lot of the different things that are going on, it leads to this sort of inevitable reality where people just don't talk about it. They just don't. It's what happens in places like in the USSR. Again, it's just comparing that. It's just, these are privately run things versus overtly a centralized government institution. But you get to a point where you don't trust anybody. You're afraid to speak your mind or speak your truth because you don't know what the consequences are going to be. So
you know what the consequences are going to be. You're going to end up like the My Pillow guy or
Sure.
the dude from the
Alex, you're gonna
CEO
be
of
Alex
On the
Jones.
watch list.
Yeah,
you're
you're
gonna
the
be the next
CEO of
Alex Jones.
Chick-fil-A. He just believes a thing, and that's enough. It's like he doesn't even act on it; just believes it, and they boycott your whole company.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it leads to this form of kind of self-censorship where people, again, this is where I was saying that I actually believe that there's a lot fewer people that truly believe these lies. It's these things that they just ignore it and deal with it. I don't think that they actually believe them, but they're more fearful of the consequences than they are in terms of feeling the importance of telling the truth.
I got a
Oh,
question for you, David. Because I was listening to your, like I said, your episode, and you said that you're well traveled. I think you said that you lived in China for a period of time, and then
Yeah.
you had touched on the long goals, right? Like we all kind of see the short term shit here. You know what I mean? Our attention spans are so short and all these things. But what is your take on like what are these like 10-year goals or these 20-year goals from like the CCP, from your opinion?
Yeah, so kind of two things there. So from I'll start with the American perspective and compare that to China. So when it comes to America, I'm actually far less conspiratorial, I think, than a lot of people. I think people that are in charge are all just about themselves and power and money. I think it's like simple. Like I think it's simple. It's as simple as that. It's about power. It's about money. I think as time has went on, I don't really believe it's this like evil plot to take over the world type of stuff.
You don't think
really
it's the lizard people?
I just think it's like, I think it's more about their personal wealth and their personal ability to maintain power and control things. But it ends when they die per se, other than that, maybe their family members, like the Bidens being a continual type of thing. If Hunter was to ever, run for office, but, I think that there are people and there are institutions that are, certainly, I think, bigger than any one nation. I think there are groups of people that have a lot of vested interests globally that don't really necessarily care about what happens with this country or that country. And I think that at a certain level of wealth and connection, you go above and beyond those national borders, right? You're kind of like, there's this elite class that isn't necessarily tied down to those things and just lives in a different thing. But so in terms of our government, I don't really think it's very, I don't think they really think things too far ahead, because I think that anybody with foresight into the future would see the train going off the proverbial cliff, right? And so the only thing that makes sense is that it seems as if they're really just mainly about their own specific, what can I make while I'm here? And to hell with what the end result is. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm not going to have to deal with it as long as I get mine, right?
Mhm.
Conversely to China. So China, probably 15 years ago or so, 20 years, probably starting 20 years ago and a little bit further, like so 15 or so, was very much similar. Okay. You had a lot of people that were very self-absorbed. It was a lot of corruption, and it was very much just people trying to, enrich themselves, power, money, control, things like that. But we really see a major shift, in the last 10 years or so. There's been a lot of changes to where I think President Xi is very much looking at the longer term game more so than other people in the past. I think the collective conscience of China has always been this last like 30 to 40 years really pushing to be a global power, but it just, you had a lot of corruption that was people kind of out to get their own. But now it's a very centralized, deterministic goal to certainly become the global superpower. I think the writing is on the wall. It's only a matter of time, I believe, until there is a major conflict of some sort with China. I don't know if it necessarily would be us or if it'll be our standard tradition of using proxies to do our bidding. But I think that that's inevitable and probably the next at least decade, if not sooner. And you see a lot of consolidation of different policies that they're doing. Just a handful. I mean, I haven't talked about these on podcasts, but they have very recently, they've just enacted a lot of, I guess you could say, policies to shape and mold their society in a particular direction that only seems logical, like it's pointed towards they know an armed conflict is coming. So recent policy changes have been moving away from their one-child policy to upping it to 2 and now 3 children. They've just introduced that to now 3. They just recently banned all foreign teachers that are teaching outside of the country. So foreigners can still move to China and like be there, and because they do obviously a serious vetting to let anybody in and things like that. But there's a very lucrative industry of people that were tutors, like English tutors, living all over the world teaching Chinese kids. They've cut that off because they're, it doesn't make any logical sense other than they're trying to control what's being taught to the kids. They have had a very much like what you would call like a war on like femininity in men. So they've had a big crackdown on like feminine pop stars and different things like that. They've instituted,
they outlawed it. That's like you completely,
like straight up banned it.
No effeminate men on TV.
No beta males. No beta males on TV. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is crazy because I don't mean to cut you off, but just real quick, it's crazy because like it's right when that happened, and that was like big all over social media. I saw a post that was complaining that the original Star Wars movies were too white, too much white male action, and I'm like, do you see what these other countries are doing? They're trying to just turn all of their men into these super alpha males.
Yes.
And you're talking about there's too many white guys in a white guy movie. In a classic movie from years ago, you can't change. That's the way it is.
Yeah, they said that the Jedis were expressing too much toxic masculinity. That was the
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there's a couple other things. What else? Oh, they had a major crackdown on video games. So they really started they started cracking down on how many hours a day children could play video games, and they actually put an indefinite ban on all creation and distribution of new video games in the entire country that has no end date yet. So
they're gonna take over.
Yeah. So these are things that don't add up in any other context, right? They're things that if you just, any one of them by themselves is goofy, but when you start like adding them all together, and then obviously they're really obvious pronounced aggression against Hong Kong recently, and then their pronounced aggression that's headlines today before Facebook died was everything about Taipei and Taiwan. They're, flying massive amounts of fighter jets over there. So they're being very aggressive externally. And so I think that, it's just a matter of time. And again, like while General Milley is worried about, that we have enough inclusion in the military and things like that, and that, all of the standard, woke progressive talking points are happening in our military, instead of worrying about like the actual goal of the military and focusing solely on that. I think anybody, and I'm not against as much diversity as possible. It's not like an anti-diversity thing, but I don't think anybody can make a valid point that diversity in and of itself as a standalone tenet does anything to enhance your military readiness. Like it has nothing to do with it at all.
Well, here's my
Good to
question
have, but it's
about
like, look at Germany.
Sure. Look
They
at China.
almost took over the whole planet.
I mean, if you look at China, they all look, I mean, they all look relatively similar. They're all like a very similar one group, one mind. And that's, I think the key point is one mind. It's one mind of a people that are all on the way that they would view it, I guess, a similar shared destiny towards an end goal that everybody is in agreement with and cares about. Now, obviously, you're talking about 1 billion people. There's obviously going to be people not in that alignment, but I think there's far more cohesion as a population there than obviously our mess that we have here.
Well,
two very different groups of people vying for two very different futures for our country.
Yeah, they I worked previously for a company that was the owners were always in China, months and months and months and months at a time for decades. And they were explaining to me that like the general and majority Chinese community is like the government has been shifting them to be all community oriented. Yes. All group oriented. So it's like if you're in your neighborhood, all of your whole neighborhood is responsible for that neighborhood. And the outliers, the people who aren't going along and they just want to be left alone, those people are shamed. They do public shaming over there. I mean, like the whole thing, there's like a people that are recruited to go around and make sure that you're contributing. And if you're not contributing, they've got a running list of all your sins. And it's like so they started it on that level, and then so that mentality then carried over into the businesses. The whole business sector's over there. It's like everything's grouped. There's like lighting district. All of the companies that run lighting are in this district. All of the companies that are in metal and lumber and all, they're in this district, and everything's set up like everybody they're not trying to take over anything. They're all just trying to build up China's GDP together. They're like forecasting for profit is in the 10s and 20s of years. They're like, oh, if we shave off, if we sell you a 5 millimeter screw, but we shave off this little bit off of the end of it, so it's not actually 5 millimeters, in 30 years, we'll have 20 million more, dollars or whatever it is. We'll be this many million more profitable. So they were explaining, like, imagine that kind of meticulous attention to detail and that long of a plan multiplied across communities, across governments, across
this is where I get
their media and everything.
Yeah, this is where I get somewhat maybe conspiratorial here, because like we were saying about like our generals, like there's no way that they don't know that this is happening over there. So it makes me wonder like why it is that they're focusing on these trivial matters rather than focusing on what matters. You know what I mean? So then I'm like, well, they must know, they must be working together on some level. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know if it's something like you said, like it's like a traitorous type of situation. I don't really know. Again, I think we have a society that's very much like we don't have people leading this country like our forefathers who actually, it really was about like the greater good of the nation. I just don't think we have those type of people. I'm not saying that they're completely indifferent and that they just completely don't care, especially in the military side of things. But I think you have a lot of people that they're more immediately concerned about like the political expedience of the decisions that they make versus like the long term. Yeah. And I know this from, I think, well, I don't want to say I know this, but I know plenty of people that are in the military, that have served careers, like entire careers in the military, retired from the military, and they're just like, this is not the same leadership. This is not the same. These are not the same type of people that I started with 20 years ago. These are it, and again, it's like what to me, I always try to look at like what makes the most sense. What's the most logical conclusion as to why? And again, I think we just live in a society in a time where most people in leadership in our country are just mainly out for their own self-interest at that moment. And
Yeah,
whatever that looks like, they just follow that easiest path.
There's been like a national push to shame and discourage patriotism.
Sure.
You know, it's like if you're patriot, if you're you know, if you have a company or even just personally, you have like a great sense of patriotism. They call it nationalism, and the nationalism is like juxtaposed with like neo-Nazism and stuff, fascism, whatever it is. And it's like, okay, so now I can't be a patriot. And at the same time, concurrently, they've been running this like the all the subgenres of like, you know, who you are, all your like, what's that word? Can't think of it. The cross, what's it called? I can't think of what the word is, but like, you're not American first, you're Italian American, you're African American, you're Jewish, Chinese, you know, Nepali American. It's all those other things first. You're Latin American or you're Latinx.
Well,
not even
according to the
American
Department of
anymore.
Homeland Security, I mean, basically, if you're a patriot, you're essentially considered a domestic terrorist, or at least on the watch list now.
Yeah, you're at least on the watch list
Wild.
now. So it's like, I think that at least in America, there has been a push, like you're saying, it's not the country trying to take over. I think it's businesses that have realized I don't have to have loyalty in any country. I'm in every country, every major country, and I serve my own purposes. And I think they've gotten to a point now where businesses are running the government, because the only people that profit, the only people that did well during any crisis, doesn't matter what the crisis is, housing crisis, it doesn't matter. Businesses are taken care of. All and only the biggest businesses. I mean, you bail out the banks, you bailed out the automotive industry. It's like we shut
Bail
down
me
the
out,
whole
bro.
entire country.
Bail me out.
Target can stay open. Amazon can stay open. I mean, it's like the rules don't apply to them. COVID doesn't affect them and nothing. It's only the business. And I mean, a war breaks out. Only the biggest businesses do well.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of different varying factors, and I think there's many different reasons, and I think that's probably the hardest part, is that there's not, like, when we look at why do politicians do things and why do these generals do things, it's probably not one reason, right? It's probably not like there's not one thing that you can pin down. I mean, you could go all the way into, you know, Epstein land, where they have dirt on everybody, and, you know, there's people that are calling the shots that they have dirt on everybody. I mean, and maybe that's true for part of it, you know, maybe that is the case for a handful of people that are that hold the levers of power, that they're just bought and paid for. I think you could easily make a strong argument about Biden for those types of things, that, you know, there's just enough smoke there that there might be a fire. But I don't think that that's just like the sweeping conspiracy of why everything happens like this. I think there's a lot of moving parts to a lot of different things. Yeah, it's greed, it's incompetence, it's people that are bought and paid for, it's people that have leverage and blackmail. I mean, there's a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, I think the one thing that remains consistent is that there's always money to be had. And I think that people kind of in general are more just out for their own self-interest versus having a true patriotic sense of duty to do right by the country as a whole. Even if that means as a leader, you personally maybe taking a loss, right? Like,
oh yeah, you'll never see that nowadays.
And so I think that that's the direction that's changing a lot in China, is with Xi. He is very much about, like, what's the other thing he told, I think it was like at one of the meetings, the Communist Party meetings or something. He told all the people in I think it's to the party, I could be wrong, but he said that you know, do not expect to live an easy life. And like, it was kind of this foreshadowing of like, there are going to be hard times, and we're going to, as a country, have to make decisions that are going to not be easy for you all at the top.
What's
know,
that
like-
saying that's like good times make weak men make hard times make strong men
Yeah.
make good times. They're making strong men right now.
Yes.
A lot of countries are. And
Yeah.
I think we made historically, like within not, I don't think millennials did it. I think it was whoever was before
World
Gen
War
X.
II, you know, all
Yeah, boomers and Gen X.
Yeah.
They made a whole,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying everybody, but predominantly, and at least the people that ended up in leadership, or the people that were supposed to stop people from getting into leadership, weak men.
Well,
And
it does follow the cycle. I mean, it is all of the World War II generation that created easy, good times.
They made good times, and those
Yeah,
good
I mean,
times.
they made it easy in this country. We had record prosperity. I mean, after World War II, we had that, and so it allowed the boomers to be complacent and create this vacuum where, you know, I always go back to the fact that like all of these, you know, leftist talking points and issues all stem from that their life just isn't difficult enough. Like the things that they're focused on, it's
I've
like
been saying this, man.
yeah, like the things that they focus on is because their life is too easy. Like if you had to worry about where you're getting your next meal from, or, you know, if you actually realized and could wrap your mind around that China is coming in the next decade, and or if they were on our doorstep and you had to face that reality as a human, that they don't care about what gender you are. They don't care about, you know, any of these other woke belief systems. They actually want to dominate you as a people.
Man,
and so
you're like in my brain, man. I've been saying this, like when Demi Lovato came out and she was like, well, I don't know what I am and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what an easy life you
Yeah.
must have.
She does know what she
Time.
is. She's a they, them.
You have that much time to ponder your own belly button to like, who's got that kind of time?
right.
I mean, I don't have a hard life, but it's busy and difficult enough. I've got
Sure.
2 kids. I've got to deal with them. You know, we're married. We've got our own relationships and stuff. I got my own personal, you know, ventures that I'm going through and stuff. Who's got the time to want? I don't have time to wonder if I'm even happy being a guy.
Well, I think
I
a big
just
part of it,
accept that it is. That's the way it is.
I think a big part of it is like when you hear people talking about like the blue check marks, right? You know, you have these blue check marks out here that do live easy freaking lives, man. And I don't know their lives entirely, but compared to people in China or wherever, like they got it
Well,
real easy, and the
Their
squeaky
lives
wheel
are good
gets
enough
the
to be like,
oil.
oh, just stay inside for 2 years. Well, if I had a 2 million square
Right.
foot mansion, I'd stay inside too.
No
My
problem.
house
Yeah.
was a resort.
Yeah. Like my whole house is the size of your bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got about 5 minutes left. So David, if you got anything that you want to, you know, put out, final thoughts, or if you want to promote, you know, your thing, like go for it, man. We got a couple minutes left, so take off.
Yeah, I mean, all I would say is that, like I said, I believe that this message gets out through a lot of people doing what we're doing on a small level of success, and I think that distributed information is going to be the future of in any way, shape, or form turning this tide. You know, I use the term we're in a battle for truth. I truly believe that, like, we are in a battle for truth, and it's not going to we're not going to win that battle for truth. And like I said, with one major player in that game being the dominant conversation maker, it's going to come through a lot of distributed effort, particularly with social media and censors and things like that, with which, you know, even going back into the hearing today with Facebook, the whistleblower thing on Facebook, that's just another reason for the ratchet to tighten. As I say, you know, they're going to tighten that ratchet to, you know, we got to ban more free speech to eliminate these things. So, at the end of the day, find your tribe of people, whether that's, the Shadow Band podcast, whether it's us, find your tribe of people that you align with in terms of values, preferably a handful of them, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups that you feel align with their values, and do as much as you can to get their information out there, spread their information, follow them on social media, share, and just really do that. Because again, it's a battle for truth, and it's about getting the truth out there in some way, shape, or form. We just launched our first podcast. We have a couple in the works in terms of the media company, but the first one, it's going to be on Spotify and Apple probably tomorrow in terms of the first couple episodes. And you can just search The Anti-Establishment or Anti-Establishment Media. It's already on YouTube. So you can search that as well. And then we have a Facebook page that's it's approaching about 70,000 followers on Facebook. So you can find us there. Just type in The Anti-Establishment. It's The Anti/Establishment, and you can follow us there. Or you can go to our website and sign up for our email list. It's antiestablishmentmedia.com. So that's where we're at. And just going to keep doing our thing.
Cool, man. Yeah, I'm going to make sure I put all the links and everything, in the descriptions and the notes
Sure.
and all that stuff for you guys. I also, once we hang up here, I want to talk to you for a minute because I got a couple plugs for you that you guys might be interested in trying to help you guys push forward. And also, man, in 2 months to hit 70,000, dude, that's
crazy.
wild.
Yeah,
man.
congratulations. That's awesome.
You guys are killing
Thank
it, crushing it for sure. But listen, David,
Thank
man,
you
I
for
really
coming on,
appreciate,
man.
I appreciate it, man, for sure. I know it's late and all that good stuff, but you guys are crushing it. I appreciate the time. I'll make sure that we put you guys out there as much as possible. I'm going to slap you guys' logo on the video and everything else, if that's cool with you, just so you got your branding. And that's pretty much all I got. Anybody else got anything else before we hang?
I got one thing to say.
Go for it.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
You see that, man?
Did you see that, David? The "Let's go, Brandon" thing?
No, I'm lost. You guys
You got to
so-
send it to him.
okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna have
It's a
to
total
send it to you.
inside joke for
It's a
anyone who's
conspiracy
seen
joke,
it
man. Yeah.
now, but I love
a
it.
I don't
I'm
NASCAR
gonna
want to
say
spoil
it
it.
all the
Don't want to
time.
spoil it.
Yeah,
Okay.
you gotta
Okay,
watch
yeah,
it.
yeah. I'll just send it to you, man. It's
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was
hilarious.
But yeah, that's it. Anybody listening to this, make sure you go find them. The Anti-Establishment Media, Shadow Band podcast. We appreciate everybody listening, and that's all we got for you. So peace.